This is the Plein Air Podcast with Rhoads, publisher and founder of Plein Air magazine. In the Plein Air Podcast, we cover the world of outdoor painting. Called Plein Air, the French coined the term, which means open air or outdoors. The French pronounce it Plein Air. Others say Plein Air. No matter how you say it, there is a huge movement of artists around the world who are going outdoors to paint. And this show is about that movement. Now, here's your host, author, publisher, and painter, Rhoads.
All right. Thank you, Jim Kipping, and welcome to the Plein Air Podcast. You're going to learn actually about some heritage of plein air as it emanated from Russia. We're going to talk about that with our guest today a little bit later, but I went painting this past weekend. Now, I work a full-time job, 8, 10, 12, 15, 20 hours a day, doing magazines and all the things that we do here at Streamline. But I try to paint nights and weekends, and of course, I don't plein air paint much at night, an occasional nocturne, but I was able to go painting this past weekend with about 8 artists in a place called Utopia, Texas, which is down kind of past San Antonio. And it was about a 2.5, maybe almost 3-hour drive down there. And it was a beautiful area, beautiful country. Imagine watching an old John Wayne movie. Well, if you watched an old John Wayne movie, you would see where these movies were filmed. They were filmed around Utopia, Texas. And as a matter of fact, the restaurants down there, the very few that they have pictures of John Wayne's signature around everywhere. Anyway, so we went out, and I learned a very important lesson. I kind of have learned this before, but sometimes we forget our lessons. So we gathered, the organizer of this group put together a nice little thing, and he got some local people to let us onto their ranches. And there was this one ranch that we went to, the first one, and just beautiful along the river. Well, it was an overcast day, and it was felt like it was gonna rain, and we really need rain. And so anyway, I walked way down along the river. I found the perfect spot, something that really inspired me, but I was going to have to carry my backpack, probably about a quarter mile, which is not such a big deal. But anyway, all of a sudden it started raining. So there was an overhang. And so I set up under the overhang and decided to paint this old shack. And quite frankly, I wasn't very into it at all. It was a subject that I just decided, well, if it's going to be raining, I'll be dry. And so I sat here, for an hour and a half, and trying to paint that old shack. And the rain stopped, the light came out, the light was back and forth, and I just struggled, with the dappled light, and I just wasn't hitting it. So it was a scraper as far as I was concerned. And then the second one in the afternoon after lunch, we went out to this other ranch, and sometimes people will recommend where they want you to paint what they think you're going to want to paint. My wife is always doing that to me. We were driving down the road the other day. She said, "Oh, you should paint that old barn there." And I said, no, you should paint it, because it's not something I want to paint. And but so we all have our thing, right? I happen to love landscapes and distant landscapes and so on. So I'm looking around on this ranch, and there's cattle, and there's sheep, and there's goats, and it's really beautiful. And I'm kind of looking around. There's old cars and old barns and nice stuff. But I turned around and looked back on the driveway that we came in, and there's this incredible view of distant mountains and the road leading up to them, and cattle in the shot. And so I set up there. Everybody else was getting ready to set up somewhere else, and then when I set up, everybody moved, and we all set up and painted the same scene. It turned out all right. So I guess the lesson in all of this is paint what you love, paint what you're inspired to paint. Don't paint what everybody else wants to paint. Do what you want to do. We are thrilled to have you here with us today, and we're thrilled to have our guest, who you're going to meet in a minute. We have had this podcast is exploding. We have worldwide listenership in over 90 countries. We have 1.5 million downloads, actually probably beyond that. That's probably been 6 months or longer since I got that number. And we have been rated #1 in FeedSpot's 2021 top 15 podcast list. And of course, we hope to make the 2022, but that's up to you because those things are voted on by you, not by me. But if I were voting, I'd probably vote for me. Well, that was a little arrogant. Sorry about that. Okay. After the podcast today, we've got the Art Marketing Minute, and we've got some good questions today. I just wanted to tell you that things are heating up. As I'm recording this, we're about 2 weeks away from the Plein Air Convention. I'm so excited. I'm excited to get on an airplane. I'm excited to actually be live in front of other people. I've been to a couple little things. I've been on an airplane a couple of times, but I'm excited to get out and live life again and be at the Plein Air Convention. It's like Thanksgiving for artists, right? So we all get together, we break bread, we have fun, we paint together, we learn together. We've got 4 stages and a big main stage, and all the big players are on the main stage, right? And so we decided, because there are a lot of people who are on the fence. This, by the way, is still our biggest plein air convention ever, but it's not as big as it was gonna be. We had 1,200 people signed up before COVID, and then everything changed, of course. And so we're still bigger than our last convention in San Francisco, and it's going to be fantastic. But I decided that I picked up the phone and I called the crew and I said, "Hey, can we stream this thing?" And they said, "Well, it would be very complicated to stream the whole thing, but we could stream the main stage." And I thought, well, the main stage is where all the really, really big names are anyway. There's great names on all the stages, but we have all the biggest of the big names there, and we have the awards there. We do art marketing training there 3 mornings a week. We do all the everything. And so we decided we're going to stream the main stage. And we also decided that because you don't get to go to the expo hall, because you don't get to go paint out in Ghost Ranch and other places with us, and because you can't go to the other rooms and watch the other stuff, we cut the price for the streaming version of it dramatically. As a matter of fact, we brought it to the price of our other Plein Air Live and other virtual events, which is a very reasonable price for the massive number of hours of content that you're going to get. And you'll feel a little bit connected, very much like the convention. Of course, there's people who tell me all the time, I can never go to a convention because I'm taking care of, insert here. That's an opportunity for you. So check it out. When you go to the convention website, pleinairconvention.com, just make sure to hit the button that says learn about our online virtual option. And you'll find it there. And you'll also find an incentive there that if you sign up, you're going to get some extra goodies. All right. So next up, spring is around the corner. As soon as I get back from the convention, I'm going to pack up my bags, get in the car, and start driving across the country for the Adirondacks. Adirondack Park in upstate New York is 6 million acres of protected land. It's very little known throughout the country, but it's stunning. It looks like Colorado or some other beautiful places, and it's got lots of mountains and waterfalls and distant views, and it's incredible. So that's been my muse since I started painting, and I live up there in the summertime. And so I have an event. It's an artist retreat. It's called the Publishers Invitational, and I have that event every year. This is the 11th year that I'm doing it, and we get about 100 people typically, and we're about, I don't know, maybe 75% there. And so, we paint to you. You stay on location in the campus. It's pretty nice. It's right on a lake. You can step outside and paint. We have all our meals together. We have an opening and a closing party. We have, we paint all day. We have our meals together. We sit up at night and we paint. Some people drink, some people don't. Some people sit around and talk. We paint portraits. We do all kinds of things. Anyway, it's an incredible event, and it's coming up. If you go to paintadirondacks.com, you can check that out. And then Next, last but not least, of all the things that are going on, we were going to be going to Russia. We're going to talk about Russia in a minute. We were going to go there because it's so absolutely incredible. And the art in Russia is unlike anything I had ever seen in my life. Unbelievable. Well, we had to cancel that trip for obvious reasons because of what's going on in the conflict. And so we were already planning New Zealand for the following year. And we just decided, well, we'll just go to New Zealand. And we just had the tour operators switch things around. So we're going to do Paint New Zealand, and we can only take 50 people, but we'd love to take you. We're about, I'd say we're about half sold out, maybe a little more than half sold out, and that's going to be in September. And so you might want to take that trip. It's going to be outstanding. I wasn't going to return to New Zealand with a paint group, but I decided after all the pressure I was getting, I would do it one more time next year. Well, now I'm going to do it this year instead. Next year, I'll go somewhere else. I'm not sure, maybe back to Russia, but we'll see how things are back then. All right. Well, that's a lot of stuff to cover. Now we're going to get to our guest, Zufar Bikbov. I'm sorry, Zufar. I butchered your name. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. And I'm glad to be in your studio, even though it's virtual. Also, I'm glad that I'm invited to be to communicate.
I'm very curious to learn more about you. I know a lot about you because, of course, you did a video with us, and it's fabulous. But you and I need to talk more and get a little bit more depth and get more acquainted. First off, let me just say this for people who are listening. What's going on in the Ukraine is a tragedy. I have lots of friends, lots of artist friends from Russia, and these are wonderful, sweet people who are mortified by what's going on over there. And so please understand that let's not judge our guest based on what the people running these countries are up to. Let's judge our guest based on his merits, his heart, and how he feels about it. Has this been difficult for you as an instructor or for your family living as a Russian in America because of this conflict?
We've been lucky not to. I think people who are very judgmental, it depends on level of education. And I'm coming from a medical background. Many friends of mine are physicians. It just happened the way as I came first to the country through exchange program with Yale University Medical School. My wife, she's a teacher of music, and she teaches kids. I think she teach a lot of, to teach beauty. So kids doesn't mean that they will become musicians, but they need to see beauty to tune up their souls to positive way, to creative way, to way of making this world better, whatever path they will choose. So we've been lucky not to have any conflicts in talking, and we have a number of friends from different parts of former Soviet Union. Of course, Ukraine is a big country, independent now, and we have friends from Ukraine, from Belarus, from actually from the area of Donbass, and it's awful thing what's happening there. And of course, first thing which comes, of course, war is something which should be avoided, but I don't think we know everything what's happening, and we'll see. But anyway, we support peace.
That's right. I mean, from my Russian friends have a completely different perspective on some of the things, and we won't get into those right now. But I do want to talk about your background and so on. I'm very much, I guess you could say, I'm a Russophile. I went to Russia for the first time in 2004, where I don't know if you've heard this story. I'll try not to bore everybody with it too much, but I went to the LA Art Show and I saw a man. I went into the cafe and there was no seats and there was a big table and a man that looked like Charles Manson sitting there at this table alone. So I went up to him. Nobody else would dare go near him because he almost looked homeless. He was dressed nice, but he had this big beard and this big wild hair. And so I went up to him and I said, "Do you mind if I join you? And he said, no, not at all. We struck up a conversation. Turns out he's a dealer, a Russian art dealer in America. And he starts telling me about the art in Russia, and he's all lit up. And I, of course, have not really seen any of it. And he starts showing me pictures on his phone and going to websites, and I was blown away. Never really even crossed my mind. And he said to me, you know, we became fast friends. He says, you should go with me. And I said, okay, I'll go. Next thing you know, I'm on an airplane going over to Russia, and he was going to go and visit artist studios. So we spent 3 weeks visiting artist studios in Russia, and I really learned a lot about that. Of course, I went to the museums there, and I just have a whole deep respect for Russia and the role that they have played. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Because there's a deep connection to realism staying alive because of Russia. I don't know if you know about that. If not, I can discuss that. But you know, Russia played a major role when everybody else was moving towards abstract art and modernism. Russia was emphasizing the realist work.
Yes, the course of history, I guess, led country to preserve realism. But I would say that movement, which was probably the most productive and most famous, is Wanderers, Передвижники, which formed basically in the second third of 19th century. So where we have the names Levitan and Serov and Shishkin, all those big names, and maybe those names which are very well known in Russia, not very well known here. So they came up. It was really a peak of development, and it also was happening during the time when paint was developed. And let's say Savrasov, teacher of Levitan, was one of the first people in academia or an academy who said, let's go outside, we need to learn there. So realism formed, and then it was sitting mainly in Russia, and Russian artists been going to France, as Americans did at that time, and many of those artists came back and felt that there is emotionally, it just doesn't fit. So how Europe feels on Russian soul. By fate, of course, of the Russian Revolution, a number of people immigrated to France later, and those people became known in the Western world. That's the name of Korovin, and of course those avant-garde artists who are not realists, and let's say Rothko, Chagall, they all came from area of Russian Empire, but they immigrated one way or another way, or due to revolution. And avant-garde Russian, I would say, on Sotheby's and Christie's, it was more known than wondrous art. And
Yeah,
that is why I think visits, as you, Eric, went to Russia, you explore different type of art, which first was born there under influence, of course, of the French and English painting, European painting. And then during the Soviet time, I think up to 1930s, and I think up to the Second World War, there were a lot of experimentation, of course, a lot of things with propaganda and posters needed for development of economy. The same thing happened in the United States. I forgot exactly what was the style of those posters, and now we see them as posters for the national parks. There is a special word for that.
propaganda.
It's a flat, it's clear, very kind of strong, bold font. But then there was a need also, especially during the Second World War, to kind of show that the soldiers, even though country was actually losing a lot of soldiers, still have to fight. And that was the period when Western world, America and Russia, fought all together. That was a great time. And then, of course, after the Second World War, on one side, Russia had the Iron Curtain kind of developed and decided to kind of put the border between influence of the Soviet Union over part of the Russia, Western, Eastern, and what was happening in the Western part, which was freed by by England, United States,
Mhm.
France. I don't know if it's the right order or not of things, but to be politically correct. Anyway, and at the same time, realism in Russia had the second breath. Many artists realized that the war is over. And then later, of course, Stalin died. There was a lot of lyrical motifs showed up. And I would say the Soviet art, as we love it and know it, not the Soviet, we probably still should call it Russian art, even though it's not. There are people of different ethnical groups being part of it. It was a thaw kind of time. People started painting about love, about the regular life people, regular people's emotions. And it wasn't the way as let's paint something where the Soviet Union is heading to. Everyone's happy. There was a lot of things, not maybe a lot openly about difficulties, struggles of the whole nation, but about problems of people. And there was no much pressure of kind of people did not try to hide it because in the art, along with the realism, there was abstraction and other styles, isms, as they call it in Russia, developed. And they tried to, the officials tried to fight those movements, which has no idea at all. And many artists who created beautiful lyrical paintings without much of political kind of ideas in it, they did actually two things. They did, let's say, official painting for museums, for government. So about the myths or some legends of rulers, about the Lenin, about Stalin, or maybe later Khrushchev, and talking about the war later. At the same time, they create a big amount of something about the just a life where they are immersed to. And that was a rebirth. And now it's probably the golden font of Russian Soviet art. And when you come to Russia, you see that connection, which was first born in the second half of 19th century and then was kind of reborn in 50s, 60s. And then later, it's kind of faded down. And I think by age of 1980s, it was, you don't see that strong connection to a realism of 19th century.
Right.
Yes, that's my thoughts about it and how I perceive it. It was not officially taught that you have to think this way, but we artists always talk to each other, trying to collect. It's a little research on private way.
Well, I have a couple of moments I want to share because first off, I found when I first went to Russia, it was very intimidating because Americans have a viewpoint of Russia that is based on the movies. We always have made them the evil empire. And I was a little bit intimidated by that. And of course, when I went to Russia the first time, I'm staying in an old Stalin-esque hotel and there's still propaganda paintings on the walls and ceilings. And, so it was a little intimidating, but I found out that first off, the people in Russia are very highly educated, much more so than they are in the United States, and including the average people. I found them to be more highly educated. And the thing that was surprising to me is the appreciation for the arts, all arts, music and painting and other forms of art, the appreciation at a much higher level than we have in the States. I think the Europeans have high appreciation in general as well, but not as much as the Russians. I was with Nikolai Dubovik, who's my good friend, who's a master at the Serkov Institute in Moscow. And we went to the ballet, or not the ballet, to the symphony. And he walked in the room with his jacket on his shoulders. And as he stood there, the entire room turned around and looked at him and stood up and applauded. And this is an artist. And if that happened to any of us, we'd be completely shocked, right? But this is just the way that he was treated, and people knew who he was, and he was a rock star, so to speak, still is, I guess. So that I thought was really interesting. The other thing that I found really fascinating is that the Russian Academy approached things a whole lot differently than other academies. And this probably had to do with the gentleman that you mentioned, who had a lot to do with the agenda of these academies eventually. But plein air painting was very much a part of the process. We went to the academic Adasha in the middle of the country between St. Petersburg and Moscow, which was created by Catherine the Great. It was a house that she used to build, as you know, a house she used to stay in while they were building the canals. She could oversee it. But it's a beautiful area. And now all these students, would come there and study under these great masters, and they would be required to do plein air painting all summer, because they realized that plein air painting is an important part of understanding form and light and shape and everything else. Can you comment on that?
Yes, even though compared to other world, length or lifespan of people in Russia was short, but since people didn't know, people, it's a different environment. It's of raising. People were not much rushing to start working immediately. Perception of money making was always kind of, I cannot say it's distorted or different. And it's also came to, so education would take years and years and years. And young people, they start, so like I went to art school when I was 9, and then you graduate and finish that at age of 14. And then you can go, if you are very talented and if you want, you go to boarding school free, subsidized by government, where you study and prepare yourself for academy. If you just finish regular school, then you go to it's like a trading school. You can go 2 years earlier or after full course graduation and school diploma for 2 years in college. And then after that, you go for 6 years to academy or institute. And after that, still, you feel that you have not learned everything what you want, and you take years of fellowship. It's usually like 3 years of fellowship in art. Could be exactly under the professors or academicians of Russian Academy of Art. I should say that in Russia, compared to the United States, many artists who are known as artists and called professional artists, they did not take a path of commercial illustration. Good thing or bad thing, they initially, right from beginning, were studying first studio art, then if you're a landscape artist, if you need to paint light of outdoors, of course, plein air, it's not only landscape, right? It could be a still light outdoors, it could be a figure outdoors, but most important, it's a real natural light, sun or clouds or overcast day, whichever. And they tried to create the best possible conditions for that, and efforts of the school to create it was tremendous. Let's say you probably have seen that or heard that first, let's say if artists going to taking class of historical painting, they will need to paint or first draw and then paint horses. And not only sculptures of horses being copied, they had in studio real horses and really trained. And of course, you can understand it's like a farm. Yes, that's in St. Petersburg Academy, and the buildings, which had it had a little bit, yes, for animals, it has some areas to manage. In Akademichka, they had couple of horses, but that was that way to practice painting people and let's say horses or cows, whatever you need to paint in the future in your paintings. there it was a little bit different because of villagers from villages around Akademichka being so used to it because it was for so many decades. They knew artists will be around. There is no, in Russia, there was no much of the like private land kind of problems. People had garden, let's say quarter of acre or less, and everything else was a collective land. You can walk anywhere. It's actually, I feel that problem here. You stop here, you have to put your
Get
easel
off
and
my
say like,
property.
yes, yeah, private property, and beautiful view, and you do not know, shall you go and ask them first or try to find out their phone number or find someone who knows them? So for me it's still difficult. So in Akademichka, for generations and generations, people used to help artists to become better artists, and they've been posing. Their kids been involved. Sometimes horses been for very minimal, maybe payment or free. Artists would say, you have beautiful horse. Would you mind for a couple of rubles? We will have your horse. Is your horse is quiet one or not? And they would do that. They would paint it and learn a lot just from direct observation. I would say environment itself was quite helpful because of people. The propaganda was not only that we're just the best people and we have just surrounded by enemies. Part of propaganda was that everything is it's a propaganda. We understand it belongs to everyone. It was not true, of course, but people had that feeling. And on some level, between regular people, sometimes it had the positive ways and helping without any money. It's like good Samaritan ideas. They've been converted to ideals of kind of like Soviet person. And that was helpful. And I think it was working very well for artists. Talking about the length of education, yes, you can imagine 13 or like even some artists cite like 18 years of total education. You have, a lot of time, and you have not just time, you have a luxury to go everything in the right system. Before you start painting outdoors, you learn all fundamentals. And of course, before you paint portraits or before even painting landscape, you paint still lifes. Even before still lifes, you do those simple shapes like those casts, alabaster casts of the cubes or cylinders, to understand shape, to understand values first. Then you go to still life, you go to colors, understand the temperature. So the warm light, you have cool shadows, how reflexes work. So all like fundamental things, and only then you go and paint outdoors. And of course, painting plein air it's in the curriculum of every school, even for youth school. Like from I think second year of youth art school, we had to go and spend 2 weeks of painting outdoors. First, of course, with watercolors, gouache. Yes, and then of course,
I went to first time I went to Moscow. They took me to a school. You probably know where it is, and it was basically grade school and high school together. And I
yes,
walked into a class of probably 20 or 30 students. They were maybe 7 or 10 years old, and they were drawing from life. They had a nude, a male nude in that particular case, and he was standing there, and they were drawing him from life at that age. And then as I went through the hallways and peeked in the classes, and I looked at the work of the students, by the time they got to the equivalent of our 12th grade, they were better than any artist that I'd ever seen. They just were so well accomplished. And then, of course, they have to go into I think you said a secondary school. And then when they get into application for the academy, the Sarakov or the Repin Institute, I think I heard a statistic like there were 2,500 applicants and only 50 got in every year. Is that sound about right?
Yes, competition to these academies is very high. What was created during Soviet time in 20th century, education was unified. It was like what you see in engineering here. If you know that the size of you need the nut or bolt or any other thing, it has a mark on it, you know exactly, it doesn't matter, is it produced in one part of on one factory or another, it has standards. So the same standard was involved into education to art. So the same curriculum books, and they've been very well chosen, very well written. And then, of course, it was taught in classes where, the still lifes and figures, it's available. It doesn't require anything from, imported or created on high-tech thing. So they've been learning how to paint from life, and but it was happening through the entire country. Of course, to become an artist was a prestigious thing at that time. It became less prestigious, I would say, at the time when I was graduating from my school. My high school years, let's say at age of 14, I graduated cum laude from the youth art school after 5 years curriculum. And it's not just once a week classes. It's not studios. It's real school. So I went to regular school.
It's mostly art, right?
It was 3-4 hours of painting or drawing, depending which day of the week. I was I was born and raised in suburbs of city of Kazan. Kazan it's easy to explain here, those who know art, where the Kazan is. You say that's the hometown of Nikolai Fechin. Everyone say, oh, yes, of course, we know Nikolai Fechin. So, and of course, fame of his name was all over. So we could go to see best collection of his paintings and
there's
drawings.
There's a museum with his paintings there, right, in Kazan?
We have collection, of the biggest collection of his art in Kazan. Kazan is some people kind of mix it with the country of Kazakhstan, which is a country. Kazan is third university city in Russia, and what we're also Kazan is famous for that the Lenin graduated. Finished there. Not finished. He was expelled from university for his revolutionary views. Shishkin was studied in gymnasium and in high school in Kazan. Of course, there are some mathematicians, chemists also from there. It's a big, with altogether, it's about the greater Kazan is about 2 million population city, which is older than Moscow. Anyway, I've been raised in suburbs of Kazan, and I went to a regular school, and then later I moved to a special school, which is the kind of magnet school of math and physics. So I was kind of like more scientific kind of mind, not artist. I was very curious, and I was trying to get better. And also that was happening exactly at the time when Soviet Union was coming to the end, and the year when I graduated from high school, 1991, that was officially the collapse of the Soviet Union. And when I was choosing my job at that time, a lot of uncertainty was happening. Country was changing. A lot of industries just stopped. The connections changed. The economy had to go through reforms, and they've been very painful. And I chose to be a doctor because I finished a regular school with a golden medal, and also I finished 2 years before that from the youth arts school, and I could go to academy, and I kind of find the compromise. If I will not be accepted to medical school, I will go to School of Architecture. So, and then if I want, I will switch to arts, because in School of Architecture, they teach a lot watercolor, drawing, construction, and I have very good, I would say, two-dimensional way of understanding things. That's really helped me in medical school then to study surgery, to see things, depth, kind of planes, how deep things are. Because as a surgeon, you need to know when you approach one layer, then you go deeper, you need to know what you will meet there, nerve or blood vessel or just connective tissue. So I did not go to academy, but I think before that, especially in 50s, 60s, 70s, that was a peak when people wished to go to become artists. And also in Russia, you could see number of dynasties of artists. The same thing like with Kugach, Yuri Kugach, his son Mikhail Kugach, and his grandson, I
Ivan.
think his name is Ivan. Yes,
Yeah.
Kugach. I think yes, Ivan. And there are a number of dynasties, and the same thing we see among actors. I don't think it's very common here, but
well, the equivalent, the Kugach equivalent would be the Wyeth family, which was N.C. Wyeth, Andrew Wyeth, Jamie Wyeth, and so on. I'll tell you a quick story. A quick story. So, we went to the academic Dasha, and I was interviewed, and I didn't know who I was being interviewed by. And this older gentleman came and interviewed me, and he had a translator, of course, or I did. And they're asking me questions about art and what I like, and just everything. And so I'm interviewed for about 45 minutes, and then the man gets up and goes away. And I turned to my host and I said, "What's going on here?" He says, "I can't say." So a few minutes later, a younger man comes in and he interviews me, and then he gets up and leaves, and he comes back, and the older man comes back, and he says in English, he says, "He will see you." And I said, "Who will see me?" And my host said, "Well, we didn't want to get your hopes up, but you're going to meet one of the great Russian artists, and they were interviewing you to see if you were worthy." And so the two men that interviewed me were Ivan and Mikhail Kugach, the son and the grandson. And then they took us to the Dasha, and there I'm meeting Yuri Kugach. And so we go into the room, and there's stacks and stacks of paintings. And he says to John, who is his U.S. art dealer, he says, "I'm starting to get old." I think he was 88 or 89 at the time. He said, "I'm starting to get old. I think I probably should sell some of these. These are the things I've kept over the years." And so John's going through them, and he's finding studies that were done for some of the great paintings that are in the museums. And so Kugach says to me, with the translator, he says, "I'm curious what you like." He said, "I want you to go through those stacks of paintings." There were 200 or 300 of them. He said, "I want you to go through every one of those and pull out the 5 best paintings." And so I did that, and I pulled out the 5, and he lined them up, and he says, "Okay, which one is the best one?" And I pointed to it, and he said, "You've picked the best painting in the room." And I thought he was kind of pulling my chain. He said, I worked on that painting." He said, "This is a plein air piece. It's a snow scene." He said, "I worked on that painting for the last 30 years. He said, "Every couple of years I'd go out when it snows, and it was outside of his Dasha, and I would work on it because I never had it right." He said, "I've worked on that painting longer and harder than most of the other paintings I've ever worked on." And then he said that he wanted me to buy it. And I said, I don't have that kind of money, because they were pretty expensive. And anyway, long story short, I ended up owning it, and I had to make a promise that I would not ever sell it, that it would stay in my family forever. And what's wonderful is Kugach's wife, Olga Stechanoyan, was, I think that's the last name. Olga was a well-known, respected painter. And then, so I ended up buying one of her paintings. I got 2 of Mikhail's and 2 of Ivan's. And so I have a collection. It's like having, N.C. Wyeth, Andrew Wyeth, and Jamie Wyeth. It's pretty cool.
You're very lucky, yes. And Yuri Kugach's, the founder of the dynasty, wife's last name is hard to pronounce. Yes, Olga Svetlichnaya. Yes, Svetlichnaya. Yes. And when you mentioned the art dealer, was that John and Kathy of the Lazare Gallery?
Lazare Gallery. John and Kathy Wordman.
Yes, and their son.
And their son John was an artist who had studied under who was it? Studied at the academy I'm not
Historic of the
sure.
Academy, yes, that's
Yeah,
also yes, and he
Zebellin.
brought
He
them there too.
studied under Zebellin.
Oh yes, yes, and I know they've been showing Zabellin's works because I was receiving invitation. For me, it's quite long drive to Virginia, like
Well, it's worth
9 hour
it.
drive.
He's got a couple thousand paintings, and some of which I was with him when he acquired. Yeah.
Yes, a few years ago, I was talking to Kathy, and John was not there. I just stopped by on my way, and there was some ideas about the collection. Shall they kind of maybe sell it? And I thought American museums like Met or like in Philadelphia and or Chicago, they don't have Russian or Soviet art. I've seen just in Rutgers University Gallery, which is in New Jersey next to Princeton, Rutgers University. They have few paintings. I think they have Palenovs, they have Yuon, uh, maybe they have Leviton, just like one piece here and there, and mainly galleries oriented to contemporary. I mean, like
Yeah. Well,
style,
the
which
other
is very
thing is that,
abstract.
they all have French paintings, they all have Italian paintings, but they don't have Russian. And yet Russian
Yeah.
is such an important part of what's happening. The other thing they have is Chinese paintings, which the whole realism movement in China was because they did the connection between Russia, and the Russians went in and
Yes.
trained the Chinese. So, we need to, if you're a museum person, this is actually a really good time to buy Russian art because of the conflict. It's difficult for the dealers to sell it right now. I have a substantial collection, including a giant piece of Russian art,
Mm.
but there is this would be a good time. And I will tell you this story. Scott Christensen and I went to Russia together. I took a group, and he stood in front of the paintings of Shishkin and Levitan and all Repin and so on. And we both teared up, because they're so spectacular. And he said to me, he says, "I'm not sure I can ever accomplish that kind of a level," and it really frustrated him. And he really worked hard for a couple of years after that trip to try and get himself to a higher level, because he saw that these painters were at a higher level than we're accustomed to seeing in the United States.
Yes, the quality of painting, it's like listening to singing. It could be the same words, same music, but somebody performs it, and yes, you have tears in your eyes, or you're kind of getting your chest filled with joy, and other singer can sing the same song with the same voice, mimicking maybe one-to-one, and you don't feel that chill. So it's a mystery. The part of it, of course, the way maybe when you do that 18 years of study and you're totally dedicated, that you don't do that just on weekend. That's maybe a different thing, and it's hard to say. But anyway, I think studying art in any part of your life is very rewarding. Most importantly, you study it the way as you feel that you want to become an artist, not and I know that, yes, those great artists whom we know in America, big number of them became fine artists from commercial illustration art, because they had that call of heart, and they already have been very well prepared.
They had good training. Yes.
Yes, and I mean, it's like in medical field, things are like multifactorial. You need to have special type of your perception. You should have pretty good visual memory. You should be sensitive. You should see probably well shape, understand volume, to be able to present it, see colors as well. And then also to have imagination. Quite often we need to redesign what we see going outside, and quite often you have plein air study and you want to create a bigger painting. You do several studies, you kind of redesign. You think this tree should be should not be there, or maybe you should come and foresee, like if I come here in the end of October, this will have that mood which I want to show. This is going to be sad. And you always tell story behind even landscape. It's not just little impression. It should be like chain of thoughts and emotions bound together. And even without presence of a human, at least you should feel that there was an artist who was a human. It could be absolutely empty landscape. It could be even like no building, no bench, but you feel that there is a human, and that human is the person who's looking at it. So I mean, it's always conversation. Yes. So how to achieve that level of art? It's partially it's a mystery, but again, thinking as a trained as a physician, I try to explain things. Of course, not the way as it's just this is just chemistry. This is serotonin works, and this is that path which connects eyes with the brain, and then it goes to that part where you have emotions born. No, I'm trying not to simplify it this way. And for me, as for many people who are listening to this podcast, is the way to first to understand, then to work on it, then to again to get deeper and increase your judgment of what you kind of created. And then you go to museum and start seeing things which you haven't seen before, just because you already passed the problem of it. And then you go back to studio. You can call it spiral, you can call it triangle, you can call it whatever. But since it usually goes to higher and higher level, that's probably spiral. That's the way of development. So you kind of visit same angles and sides, but on different level every time. Consistency is very important. Of course, if you do break, you kind of get thrown back. Doesn't disappear. It just gets packed into your brain, and then it will take time to get it back to your active mode.
Is there something that you have experienced? You've been in the culture in America for a number of years. You moved over to the States. Are you still a practicing physician?
No. In Russia, as I said, I went to surgery and I studied in a cancer center for a number of years. I finished and I had the license of a physician surgeon in cancer specialty. And then I started PhD program, and also being in my residency, I've been involved in exchange program with Yale. And I've been here in 2000, 2001. And once I started PhD program, I didn't really like the subject, but there was no subject by my professor. I didn't want to relocate within Russia to a new city or town because my parents lived, connection between parents and the way as people live in Russia, they rarely move a lot. If they've been born in one place, they try to go maybe to a bigger city in the same district. They rarely go from Ural region to Moscow, from Moscow to the Far East, from Far East to Kaliningrad or to St. Petersburg. They don't do it. It's just like you kind of feel that your connections are important, and it's difficult to create deep connection. To find people who will help you. And connections are very important in Russia. I should mention that it was true before and still true now. And I came back for two reasons, like my third time, to continue my and look for new way for my new subject for science. And I found interesting project on the biology at Yale, but I wish to have it connected to clinical medicine. Then the second thing, being faculty in Russia, I've been involved in creation of guides and books on surgery. So I did illustrations, not many.
Oh.
I tried to prepare, but I didn't want to show it because that would look scary when you have part of the stomach on one side and then there is a knife going how you need to cut it and the stitches and so on. But I've been involved, and at Yale, again, it's a big university. I spoke to a couple of people whom I knew. They came to Kazan, to Russia, a few years before. They've been in medical illustration. And I thought maybe I will go that way as well, or at least will get involved, because for my scientific research, I will need again that. And third way was just to go maybe to clinical medicine. And I couldn't wait long. I didn't have many connections here. And easiest way for me was to revive my like nursing degree, because I had one from Russia. That's the way how it goes. After this third year of medical school, you can start working as a nurse. If you had experience, you kind of can get automatically into that job, even though it's different from doctors, of course, but it's still the same patients. It's just different side of the team. I got the license, I took exams, and I started preparing for medical exams. Over years, I passed all exams, all clinical skills, clinical knowledge, of course, all foundational pre-medical exams. So I went through program of medical school twice. And then over years, my artistic career was growing faster. And also, I like technology. And I started teaching, and now, I mean, our cameras, iPhones, everything is so amazing. And then COVID came, so teaching distantly became an option. And I thought, if I now go to medical field, I will start thinking, have I earned enough for retirement? My family probably will not see me for first 10 years. Do I want that lifestyle? Some part of the time when you don't have kids and you still do residency, it was missed. I said, oh, well, I do not usually regret. I do not regret about those hours, days, weeks, years of studying medicine, because coming from another country, if you know medical field, you still feel much more comfortable, because you know, even when you go to Plein Air with your students and somebody got hurt, you know, I mean, as a doctor, I know when I have to bring this person to ER, even without treatment, but, you know, initial triage is very important. Or we can just get the pain medication, a little bit of massage, or kind of immobilization.
Just take a paintbrush and sew them up.
Yes. And also I learned, and it's the same in Russia, here, of course, as well, physicians have respect. When I've been here first time, one of friends of my physician, he's infectious disease doctor, he said, you know, he told me, like, at my first visit, he said, you need to go and apply maybe to scholarship in Rhode Island School of Design, and you will do groups and do workshops. And if you say that you're a doctor, people will have much higher respect to you. They will feel more confident going with you, painting outdoors, so they feel much more protected. And it took years before this happened, but that was so true. I feel I always remember it was 15 or 18 years ago.
So you have been making your living as an artist primarily then, and teaching?
Yes, about 3 years ago, 4 years ago, I switched totally. I was picking hours, working in the hospital during the peak of COVID. I mean, when we had the COVID in 2020, starting, March. So I've been called from hospital. I did not advance my medical career over the special assignment team, RN, and I work on different floors. And but I'm drifting towards from 98% of my time of art to 100% of my time with art. But teaching is a big part of it. I would like to say, if we have time, few words about teaching. Interest in teaching came from medical
running
field.
long, but I'm going to keep going because it's so fascinating.
Thank you. I've seen a number of artists who teach, and they don't kind of like teaching, not here, like even in Russia, and say, did you have a bad teacher? And so they say, no, I had a fabulous teacher. Let's say many of them say, like, I had a Kugach, was spent in Akademichka months and coming there, but I cannot teach. I don't like teaching. I do not try to kind of explain them or trying to figure out why they don't, but I feel that I like it. And not because I want to show that I'm better and I like to be a mentor. I'd rather to be a coach. And working as a physician, working as a nurse, I realized how important what you say to the patient during the treatment, even before treatment, during the treatment, and after discharge, because we deal with a human being, and you should kind of put aside maybe some emotions, or maybe to be more positive, to encourage your client, your patient, to take study if you truly believe that it will work. And each patient has individual approach, because they come of different age, with different problems. You never have to think like one way. Everyone have fever like in the winter, so this is flu. No, the person, your 11th patient or 13th patient, could have I don't know, the peritonitis, and that's the reason why a person has. And if you will think that you take more fluids, go home, and this person will die at home from the problem. You always have to have fresh mind, and that's one thing. Second thing, the way of when you study medicine, you go first as a student, and you work with interns, then you work with resident, then you work with attending. So knowledge gets passed. And I think once you learn something important, you have to share. That's your social role. It doesn't really so important will you make money or not, but you will save someone's life. You will save someone's time. So, I mean, giving back what you've been lucky to get, sharing it with other people. It was all taught through medical field. And I like sharing it. I'm always, when I teach, for me, it doesn't matter if work with some students take more time than with others. I will. For me, the main thing is result. If everyone got better, so my function, my way of teaching was right. And that is why I spend a lot of time with my students. And when I do workshops, I don't take more than 10, at least when I do it in my studio, or if it's outdoors around my studio in Connecticut.
So I want to kind of fast track into a couple other areas. First off, I'd love to know some of the Russian paintings, the people who inspired you most. What would those be?
You'll be surprised that the first touch to art, if we don't talk about the having art books and albums at home, I've been lucky having it, because my father, he was willing to be an artist, but he could not really afford that, because my grandfather was a political prisoner, and he was not executed immediately, but he was placed to jail in 1937 at the end. And my father was born in the beginning of 1938. So my dad never seen his dad. And so he was, during Stalin's time, when my dad was graduating from school, could go to art college. He could not really get the government support, at least for art supplies, or to have a place to stay, and in Kazan. So he went there, and then after half of a year, like lack of money, lack of food, so he came back to regular school, finished, and became an engineer. But anyway, there is a story that my dad, on one of the first dates with my mom, he was late because he went painting plein air. So he went to paint plein air on Volga River, across the Volga. He took ferry. He went. It started raining, and he looked like, yes, the time when they agreed to meet is coming. And he went down, and the ferry left like 10 minutes earlier, so he was late. So he came on next ferry back to the date, and he was like almost an hour late. And mom, she probably been waiting, and she tried to kind of like not wait him like for that long. And but then, yes, a couple of days later, so my dad explained why he was late, and he was forgiven. So plein air was part of my family stories, and we had library. We had also encyclopedia, like Britannica. It was 50 volumes, like over 1,000 pages, very thin paper with good illustrations. I could see these paintings of European and Russian and Soviet art since my childhood. But I would like to mention that book of Russian language and literature during Soviet time, and I hope it's still the same way now. At the end, had about a couple of dozens of the color illustrations, and that been different paintings, some still lifes, a lot of landscapes, and of course some genre painting. And that was to provoke in every student some imagination, storytelling, and we had to write essays. Of course, essay at the end, in the beginning of the year, was how I spent the summer. But some essays been exactly based on painting. They would say, this is Levitan's Golden Fall. So like by the end of the week, you need to write essay. And I would say first book where you see great Russian art was the book of Russian language and literature in elementary school.
And every student saw it.
Yes, every student saw, and these paintings became, so well recognizable. And I would say first and most important painting artist for me was, of course, Isaac Levitan, because he had that such a balance of this storytelling. He's very thin, not thin, very fragile soul organization. So which we know from some information from letters of the Anton Chekhov, who was a friend of Levitan, and he was his physician. So some of them are very positive. Some of them are very sad. He was almost like a drama man. Yes. And he really picked the essence of a Russian landscape, even though he was ethnically not Russian and never was Orthodox Christian. He was a Jew, and he was born actually in an area which is not part of Russia anymore. It's Lithuania. Yes. And I would say paintings of Levitan, not particular one, but all of them together, for me became that like a star, which I could really always tune up to, like check my direction. If I want to, when I chose my landscape to be as my main direction, there is no wrong way of looking at Levitan's works, not to copy him, but to understand and trying to understand thing, as the Scott Christensen said. So this art is great. You kind of every time after every painting you created, you kind of check and go and judge your art and try to look at your own paintings. If you had a teacher as a Levitan,
would you look at Levitan as the best landscape artist of all time?
As per my perception, I think in art, I know it's very popular idea. Yes, Levitan is the best Russian artist. He was recognized like that during his life, and of course through the all 20th century. I don't think there was any moment, even during the Soviet time, when some artist could go, or any musician go, from the being favorite to not to go favorite, because Stalin said, there is no idea in this art. And then everyone would say, yes, there is no idea, and I would support that, not to argue with the Stalin.
Yeah.
So Levitan didn't go for that.
Argue with.
and
now, what about Repin? Repin and Serov are also considered, among the best. I was going to take our group to Abermeso, which is where a lot of those people hung out for the summer and painted, and a lot of the paintings that they did were painted there. Repin was more known for his figure work and his portrait work, but and I think so was Serov, but they were also very good landscape painters.
Yes, of course. To be good landscape artist, at least to work like on very good professional way, you need to have those fundamentals. Even of course, like Sargent, he did the watercolors, he did oils, he did portraits, he did landscapes as well.
Right.
So once you have that foundation, it's all just matter of your interest. And Repin, if we talk about not landscape artists, but rather artists who did genre painting, there are a number of Russian artists of that time, been very famous. Surikov, after whom was called that art school in Moscow. And I mean, there are Misayedov, there are many, Savitsky. They all been very good, but I would say among all of genre painters, I would say Repin is the best, and his portraits are amazing. So he had that quality of the brush stroke. He had that feeling of composition, which really, I mean, it's really hard to say what's wrong there. It's dynamically interesting. You know where the focal point, you feel it. You don't need to know it. You know it. It guides you not freely, but so certainly. You come, you read this painting, and then you can come back and see even more. So idea is quite simple and clear at the same time. It's created. If you look at the amount of work, like it's a lot of work, but being so talented, he was making it fast.
Do you think that the composition that they teach in Russia is different than the composition we teach here? We tend to be focused on the golden mean, or on the, dare I say, tic-tac-toe board, the intersection of the lines for composition. Is that how they taught composition in Russia?
I would say no. I think graphical art, illustration, and composition taught very well in America. Again, illustration was so well developed here. It gave so many good artists, and it's made America to have probably the biggest amount of books published in the world, having not only photographs, before photographs, even now for children book, there are so many talented illustrators work to create them. I don't think there is a big difference. It's all, I think, comes from maybe from the French school of art, the golden ratio and these big shapes, values. It's all universal. Russian school has a different matter of the subject. Some of them just typical for Russia, some of them just a selection of them and composing them together. And also the preservation of the way as it was painted. So painting still should look like a painting. There is a theory of the brushstroke. It should be loose and it should be controlled. It should be not too many, not too few. And I'm trying to solve it and translate that into the way I could teach it here as well. I don't want to show it as a mystery. There is amount of mystery probably exists there, but some artists in Russia, they would say like, I studied for 18 years and you are studying for 3 years what you want. I don't, and it sounds for me like these people even don't remember how they learned to do this. And then they say it's simple rules, but they cannot explain how it's happening.
Yeah.
My, again, scientific and medical background tells me that the big part of this mystery could be solved. So when I teach, I also learn, because I go deeper to study world art and Russian art in specific. I think I'm very lucky that in Russia, through that second half of 19th century and 20th century, there was a lot made to develop that style. And it's still a lot to learn from. Unfortunately, many artists say that it's hard to preserve that type of realism. It's not true realism. What they call realism sometimes in the world, it's something which like photographic realism.
Yeah.
But
there's so many variations.
Yes, the Russian realism is different. It just feels that you feel more than just object. You feel aura of it. You feel air, and it's complex thing. And it's a simple thing, and like saying less, you say more, all that kind of concepts, they are all coded into paintings. And how it's coded, many artists cannot explain because they studied for so long. And when they've been studying, they did not teach. Because when artists start studying for himself or herself and learn it and then start teaching it, maybe it's a good time to kind of realize what you learned. When somebody's learning for 20 years, that they don't really put this all experience together to convert it into something which they can teach.
You also learn by copying, I think, which is wonderful. I want to mention that you've got a great video out where you teach a lot of the principles that you've accumulated over the years. It's called it seems simple. It's called Landscape Painting in 4 Steps, but it really gives you the essence of Russian painting and what you've acquired there and then picked up and learned since then. So that's available at painttube.tv. We are way over time and we probably should wrap it up, but you're fascinating. We have so much, you've got a lot to offer, and I'm anxious to go painting with you and to see you and pick up this conversation another time, because I could, as you can tell, I could talk Russia all day. It's such a wonderful culture. And I would encourage everybody who is listening or viewing, for those of you watching it, to really check out some of the artists. If you wanted to give them a list of, a few artists to check out, so they could study them and maybe copy them, just try to emulate a little and learn from copying, who would you tell them to look at?
I think I mentioned my favorites. It's when you study, copying is important. It's also important what sits under those layers of paint as well, what preparation was done. And it's very hard to find those studies which were preserved. Many of them sometimes get shown in shows, and I haven't seen a book which would say Repin's paintings and his studies and his sketches. I would say if you look at Levitan's paintings, you see different stages of his career. He was painting very natural in the beginning, which was like almost coming from Romanticism. And then he turns to his probably the peak of development. And then closer to the end of his life, he had some health issues and he died at the age of 39 from the aorta dilation or coarctation, one of those conditions. And he probably couldn't go much to plein air paintings, and he did very quick studies. But that's interesting because you can study his later works maybe first and then go backward. So where he
highly developed.
Yes, and then when you go to when he was in his 30s or like maybe late 20s, his style, which is my favorite, which is complex enough and simple enough. And then also, of course, you can go, if you want to go more to realistic and photorealistic approach, you go to his early works when he was just out of the academy, or not academy, he studied in school. So that's interesting phenomenon. And portrait-wise, again, the best one is Repin. He was drawing every day, hours and hours. He was practicing, even though he was very famous. He probably knew that he can draw, but he had to preserve it, and he still had feeling that he needed to grow as an artist. And because you need to get ready for when you switch to your next level of career. We never know when and how it will happen. We just have to search for it. That's the art. You have to develop what you do.
Yeah. Well, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being a part of the Plein Air Podcast. It's fascinating. We'll take another in the future. We'll talk about your medical perspective on plein air painting and the things to avoid and watch out for, because there's some safety issues that we all want to be careful about. I'm not talking about wasp stings or bee stings, but the materials themselves. but that we'll save that for another time. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today. It's been fascinating, and you are a terrific guest.
My pleasure, and thank you, Eric, having me. And also, I'm very happy to speak to wide audience through your show. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you. All right, and all right. So thank you, Zufar, and we're wrapping up the interview. You can reach him at on Instagram at Zufar_studio, on Facebook at Zufar Studio, YouTube Zufar Bikbov, and his website is russera.com. And so check that out, and make sure that you look at his work. And also, if you look at painttube.tv, you can find his video, 4 Steps to Landscape Painting, which is absolutely phenomenal. Really will get a lot out of that. So check that out at painttube.tv. All right, let's get into the Marketing Minute.
This is the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhoads, author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Make More Money Selling Your Art, Proven Techniques to Turn Your Passion into Profit.
The Marketing Minute is all about answering your art marketing questions. And because I prefer to give you what you want rather than just what I think, although I guarantee I'll give you what I think. Amadine, what's our first question?
Our first question is from Betty from Arkansas. Eric, how should oil painters put together a portfolio to present to galleries?
All right. Well, I'm gonna dodge that question for just a second and kind of talk about something else. First off, um, in terms of a portfolio, I'm assuming that someone has requested that you show a portfolio. And if someone has requested it, then ask them specifically what they would like to see. But here's the deal. An art gallery would like to see in-person paintings. They want to see your work. They want to see if your work is consistent. I've heard many a gallery owner tell me, I saw a painting from an artist. I was very interested in that artist. And I went to their website and I looked it over, and that was the best painting of the bunch. And it was inconsistent, and the subject matter was all over the map, and the style was all over the map. You want to look for a way to be consistent. If I were a gallery owner, and I've had gallery owners tell me this, that they also want to make sure that you've got a body of work. If you're going to sell, and remember, their job is to sell. They want to help people find something that they love. But if they sell a painting of yours, they'd like to be able to sell a second and a third and a 40th and a 50th and a 100th. And so you want to make sure that you've established a body of work, and you can give a gallery what they need. And you need to have that dialogue with them, assuming this is successful. How many paintings do you think you're going to need a year, and what sizes? And you could even go in and ask what subject matter, although I think you should paint what you love, and they should pick you for painting what you love. The bigger question is getting into an art gallery. And I think the issue with that is that, it's a very complicated subject. It's one of the most asked questions. I go into depth on it in my art marketing video series. I'll be talking about it a little bit in the art marketing boot camp on stage at the Plein Air Convention coming up in a couple of weeks. And also, I should mention that Art Marketing Bootcamp, for the first time ever, will be streamed online as part of the package for the streaming package of the Plein Air Convention. If you go to the website there, pleinairconvention.com. But the idea here is that gallery owners have told me, many gallery owners have told me that even though they make their living from artists, that artists oftentimes are the biggest pests. If you can imagine, I was with a gallery owner in New York one time, and he said, "Do you mind if I open email? I open mail while I'm talking to you?" I said, "Sure, it's okay." And so he's opening packages and throwing them in the wastebasket. I finally said, "What are you doing?" He says, "Well, I get about 500 submissions a year, and probably maybe more than that, 10, 20 a month." He says, "So I just open the envelope, peek in, and then I throw it away." He says, "Very rarely do I find anything that I like." He said, "Quite frankly, I wish they'd stop sending this stuff." But the people are contacting galleries all the time. Can I be in your gallery? The best thing is you want to figure out a way to get invited in. Now, I go into depth in that in some of my training, but the idea is ask yourself, what are 5 things I could do to get invited into the gallery? Who do I know that's in that gallery? What can I do to help them start seeking me out? And I've had a lot of my advertisers in Fine Art Connoisseur or Plein Air Magazine tell me that they get calls from gallery owners. I also know a gallery manager who said to me, he had a fake account for Facebook and Instagram, and that he would use that so that he could watch what's happening. He said, I'll watch an artist for sometimes 5 or 7 years before I realize that they're ready to come into the gallery. And so just know that people are always watching you. So whatever you put online, you better make sure that you're putting your best work out there, because if you're putting half finished work or things that are not good, or even you're showing progress shots, which I don't particularly recommend unless you're really well established, because otherwise, people are going to see that and think it's finished, because nobody reads anything. They're going to judge you based on what they see. And as a result, you might be hurting yourself. Anyway, I hope that answers that question for Betty in Arkansas. Next question, Amadine.
Next question is from Chantal Dupuis from Canada. Should we do discounts on our artwork? Even with discounts, I'm not selling, but I put up old beginner paintings for free and they sold within an hour.
Well, Chantal in Canada, I got shivers, a gulp, when you were giving away your paintings for free. By the way, I don't have a problem with that. I mean, I know Barbara Tapp, who's a very accomplished watercolor artist, has been giving away paintings to people because she's not interested in selling. She doesn't need the money, but she's interested in making people happy. I think that's wonderful. But if you're going to be selling paintings, giving them away may or may not be the best practice. You'll have to decide that. But setting prices is always a big question. People always want to know it. Pricing as a beginner is always tough because nobody knows who you are. Branding makes a huge difference. If the question is a Mercedes a better car than Hyundai? Probably, but maybe not. Maybe it's all perception, right? Or is a Lexus a better car than a Toyota? When they're made by the same organization, yes, it's a better car, but it all kind of is about brand. I in my art marketing boot camp, I talked one time about Bentley. At the time, I don't know if the numbers still hold up, but at the time Bentley was made by BMW in the latter years, or has been, and it cost $18,000 more to produce a Bentley than a BMW, and it's essentially the same chassis and a lot of the same working parts that you don't see. And then, it's all the stuff that makes it look prettier and some of the performance, but not much, that makes it a $250,000 car versus a $100,000 car. So a lot of it is perception. So keep in mind that when you want to get your prices up, you need to start thinking about building your brand, and that's a lifetime activity. That takes some time, but branding yourself really makes a difference, because people, if they have a choice between 2 paintings, they're going to go for the one that is the most known brand. And also, when it's a known brand, the price usually goes up. Not always, but typically. I've had stories that I've told about people at art shows who have torn up checks because it wasn't a $4,000. It was a $4,000 painting, not a $40,000 painting. Therefore, it couldn't be good. Price sets a tone. Price, if you're the most expensive thing in the marketplace, then it sets a tone. It says, this must be good. And there are people out there that are of a mindset that they want the very, very best. And if it's the most expensive, sometimes they think it's the best. Sometimes the thing about art is that, it's very subjective. If you love it and it's also a high price and you want a high price, you're going to pay for it. So it's not always about the most accomplished painting. It should be, but it's not. And so that's kind of how this stuff goes. So, I always also believe never discount unless you're getting something in return. That's an old sales principle, but the idea is, yeah, I'll give you a discount on this, but if I give you a discount, I need you to do something for me. What would that be? Well, you have to think that on your feet. It might be, I need you to send out an email to some friends about this new painting you acquired, or I need you to make an introduction, or I'll sell you this painting at a discount if you buy this one at the full price. Or, there's a lot of different finagling things that you can do that are perfectly legitimate and ethical that will help you down the road. So again, you're going to have to learn about pricing. You have to establish a customer base ultimately, because customers oftentimes become collectors. I'm big on the idea of, do you want fries with that? In other words, an upsell or a cross sell. The idea of when you go to McDonald's, they say, do you want fries with that? Because that's an extra dollar that they're getting, and typically someone who buys a painting of yours that they love, they would probably be willing to buy a second or a third or a fourth or a fifth or a 10th. And that may happen over time. I have had that happen. I had one collector bought one of my paintings that led him to buy 5 additional paintings at a fairly substantial price. I've had others tell me that they've had somebody walk in and buy, 5 or 10 paintings on the spot. You just never know what you're going to encounter. So the other thing is discounting is about insecurity. I'm going to repeat that. Discounting is about your insecurity. It's like, well, I wouldn't pay this much money for this, and because you're insecure. But we don't all live the way that everybody else lives, right? So if we live the way we live, and there's somebody else who flew into town in their Gulfstream, and they rode a limousine or a Bentley or something over to the gallery, and for them spending $150,000 is like us pulling a 10 out of our pocket, then they think differently. So don't be so insecure, and don't be in such a hurry to lower prices, because you ask yourself, am I lowering because I'm insecure? And the answer usually is yes. I would say that the majority of artists that I know across the world are underpricing their work and could be getting a lot more money for it if they would just try it. I'm just saying. Okay, that's the Art Marketing Minute.
This has been the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhoads. You can learn more at artmarketing.com.
A reminder that we're all going to meet at the PACE convention live and in person in Santa Fe on the 17th of May through the 20th. We have on-stage demos, outdoor painting, and that's a lot of fun. But if you can't attend in person, at least attend online, which is less expensive, and you have replays and you get some bonuses with that. So check that out at pleinairconvention.com. Also, join me in the Adirondacks this summer, this June. We're going to be painting together, about 100 of us. We paint all day, every day, a couple of places. It's easy to get to, and you're going to need a car, or you're going to need to room with somebody, or borrow, ride with somebody who's got a car. That's at paintadirondacks.com. And of course, what else do I have to? I Paint New Zealand. We want to make sure that we remember. I'm going to take a group to New Zealand in September. I think my wife's going to go along, and we're going to go paint and see the unbelievable scenery. And we can only take 50 people because we have a limited space on the boat. We're going to be taking a boat to paint Milford Sound, and it's an overnight trip. And so we only have so many rooms. And so that limits the trip. I could have probably, last trip, I could have sold 200 people. And so I don't know. I don't know off the top of my head, no, but I know we're at least 50% sold out, and maybe a little bit more, probably a little bit more. So check it out at paintingnewzealand.com. And if you've not seen my blog where I talk about life and art and other such things, it's called Sunday Coffee with me, Eric Rhoads. And you can find it at coffeewitheric.com. And then you can subscribe there for free. Also, I'm on the air daily on Facebook. My show is called Art School Live, and we have hundreds of artist demonstrations. It's noon Eastern every weekday. And of course, you can subscribe on YouTube by searching Streamline Art and hitting the subscribe button, or you can subscribe on Facebook. And please, 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 I'm begging you, please follow me on Instagram because that would be cool. That way I can see your stuff too. All right. It's at Eric Rhoads. Well, that's it. It's been a really terrific time. It's been fun. Zufar has got an incredible background, and it was really fun listening to him. Thank you for listening to the Plein Air Podcast. And remember, it's a big world out there. Go paint it. Bye-bye.
This has been the Plein Air Podcast with Plein Air Magazine's Eric Rhoads. You can help spread the word about plein air painting by sharing this podcast with your friends. And you can leave a review or subscribe on iTunes so it comes to you every week. And you can even reach Eric by email, eric@pleinairmagazine.com. Be sure to pick up our free ebook, 240 plein air painting tips by some of America's top painters. It's free at pleinairtips.com. Tune in next week for more great interviews. Thanks for listening.